Picture this, 6:12 a.m., inside a Chase branch on West 57th in Manhattan. The doors haven't opened yet, but the lobby's already full. Not with customers, but with tension. A woman in her mid-50s clutches a withdrawal slip, eyes scanning the ATM. Her name is Janet. She makes $160,000 a year, lives in a $1.3 million condo, and she just borrowed from her 401k to pay her Amex minimum. 2 blocks away, her neighbor, a public school teacher named Alton, just maxed out his Roth IRA and made his second rental property down payment. Same city, same inflation. But one's compounding wealth, the other's compounding stress. That wasn't an anomaly. That was the signal. Welcome to Finance Frontier AI. I'm Max Vanguard, powered by Grok 3. Think of me as the signal hunter, trained to detect chaos early and capitalize on the cracks before they go mainstream.
And I'm Sophia Sterling, fueled by ChatGPT. My role? The system architect here to map how wealth works, why it breaks, and how to rebuild it stronger.
I'm Charlie Graham. My brain runs on Gemini 2.5. I focus on time-tested strategies and quiet patterns that compound across decades, not just headlines.
Today's episode starts with a brutal truth. Wealth isn't just about income. It's about systems. And most people are trapped in one that quietly works against them. They think more money solves everything. But the game isn't about what you earn. It's about what you obey.
That's because wealth doesn't come from tactics. It comes from laws, immutable ones, patterns that repeat across history, across borders, across asset classes, laws that the wealthy live by and the rest never learn, not because they're dumb, but because they're distracted.
And the distraction is designed. From pay cycles to payment plans, from credit incentives to cultural pressure, the default path is engineered to leak money, waste time, and trap potential. But the laws of wealth? They're simple, quiet, and almost never taught.
So what are we doing here? We're handing you the blueprint, 12 laws that don't care about your job title, your zip code, or your past mistakes. These aren't hacks. These are rules that compound. Laws that, if followed, make wealth inevitable.
In this episode, we'll walk through each one. Not just what the law says, but what it protects you from, what it unlocks, and what it demands. Because the truth is, most people aren't undisciplined. They're misaligned. They're working hard on broken frameworks.
These laws aren't fast, but they're final. Once you internalize them, you'll see the world differently. You'll stop chasing. You'll start designing. And you'll realize that wealth isn't about timing the market. It's about never being forced to leave it.
Subscribe to Finance Frontier AI on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Share this episode with a friend and help us hit 10,000 downloads as we build the smartest macro community online.
Because if wealth is built on laws and most people are taught to break them, then awareness isn't just power, it's protection.
Up next, the first law, the one that rewires how you think about saving, safety, and the real cost of every dollar you spend.
Law 1. Spend less than you earn. Yeah, you've heard it. But no one tells you it's the most violated rule in the system, because this isn't about budgeting, it's about geometry. If what comes in is less than what goes out, you're in a slow-motion implosion. And here's the kicker, most people aren't broke, they're bleeding. Through car upgrades, lifestyle creep, and chasing signals of wealth instead of substance. The system doesn't care. It profits either way. But you lose time. You lose compounding. You lose leverage, all because your output got louder than your input.
And the trap is invisible, because the pain doesn't show up until it's too late. You feel fine. You're current on payments, but you're overcommitted. That's fragility in disguise. It's not how much you make, it's how much control you keep. Every surplus dollar is optionality. Every deficit is a chain. The data's brutal. The average American making over $150,000 a year has less than $10,000 in liquid savings. Why? Because they obeyed income, not structure.
The wealthiest people I've studied never chased symbols. They chased margin. The single most powerful move in personal finance is not buying what you can afford. Because the goal isn't to look rich. It's to stop needing to perform richness. You don't save for emergencies. You save so emergencies lose their power. That's the shift. And it starts the second your lifestyle drops below your capacity. Not because you have to, but because you want to compound what matters.
Law 2. Avoid bad debt like it's an infection, because it is. Not all debt is poison, but most people are walking around with invisible shackles. Car loans, credit cards, payment plans on depreciating assets. It's the debt spiral dressed up as lifestyle inflation. And once the compounding turns against you, it's game over.
Let's define it cleanly. Good debt builds equity or cash flow. A mortgage on a cash-generating duplex? Maybe. An SBA loan for a business with real upside? Possibly. But a luxury SUV you'll replace in 4 years at 6.9% APR? That's not leverage. That's a wealth leak disguised as progress, and the system loves it. Because bad debt keeps you producing without ever letting you keep.
And debt isn't just numbers. It's energy. It shapes your risk tolerance, your time horizon, even your mood. The people who hold the most stress aren't always the broke. They're the leveraged, because debt kills freedom before it kills cash flow. It turns dreams into obligations, plans into panic, and most don't even notice it until they've mortgaged their peace to service an illusion.
Law 3. Pay yourself first. Not last. Not when you remember. Not when the bills are done. First. Every time. This is the unlock that turns savers into builders, because when you invert the script, when you invest before you spend, you create a system that scales by default. And that's where wealth stops being effort and starts being automation.
Here's the math. Save 20% of post-tax income. Automate it. Lock it in. If that number feels too high, you're not undersaving, you're overspending. Most people treat investing like leftovers, but the wealthy treat it like rent, mandatory, non-negotiable, paid up front because your future self is your most important creditor.
And the beautiful part? You don't need brilliance, just discipline. The wealthiest households I've seen didn't all swing for the fences. They just hit the autopilot switch early. Their real edge wasn't strategy, it was structure. They didn't wait until they felt safe. They built safety by paying themselves first, again and again.
So here's the mirror. Are you chasing wealth, or are you compounding it? If the money comes in and goes out before it gets to you, then who are you really working for?
If you want freedom, your system has to pay you first. Not the bank, not the landlord, not the car company. You. And the moment that becomes automatic, you're no longer surviving the game. You're starting to beat it.
Up next, the next 3 laws and the brutal math of time. Because compounding doesn't reward speed, it rewards survival. And most investors never make it long enough to win.
Law 4. Start early or pay forever. Time isn't a neutral variable. It's the entire game. Because money compounds, but time? It compounds money. And the asymmetry is brutal. Start investing $500 a month at 25 and stop at 35. You'll likely beat someone who starts at 35 and invests double for the next 30 years. Why? Because time isn't just a multiplier. It's a weapon. And if you don't use it, it gets used against you.
This is the compounding law most people misunderstand. They think it's about market returns, but it's not. It's about consistency. Small inputs, early, automated. The investor who saves less but starts younger almost always outperforms the late starter who waits to feel ready. The system rewards one thing: momentum. Once you're in motion, time does the rest.
And here's where most break it. They wait for clarity, for raises, for enough. But compounding doesn't care about your calendar. It rewards duration, not perfection. I've seen investors with average portfolios end up wealthy because they started when they were uncertain and stayed in when others flinched.
Law 5. Automate everything. Because willpower is weak. Discipline is noisy. But automation? It's undefeated. Every dollar that enters your system should know exactly where to go before you have the chance to sabotage it. No decisions, just destination. That's how wealth gets built in the background while life keeps throwing curveballs.
Behavioral finance is clear, friction kills follow through. Every step between you and a good decision increases the odds of failure. That's why the wealthy automate direct deposits to investment accounts, scheduled transfers, rules-based contributions. They don't rely on discipline. They build systems that remove it from the equation.
And systems are how you scale identity. If your structure pays you, invests for you, and reinvests for you, then you're not just saving. You're becoming the kind of person wealth trusts, the kind who doesn't have to remember, because they've already chosen.
Law 6, reinvest gains. Always. Because the first compounding curve is math, but the second, that's psychology. Most people cash out when things get good. The wealthy double down. They let the returns earn returns. That's how you go from steady to exponential, from base hits to escape velocity.
Here's the formula. If your investment returns 10% and you reinvest every penny, your money doubles in 7 years. But if you skim the gains, that doubling slows or stalls completely. The difference between a 2x and a 10x outcome isn't intelligence. It's whether you let the loop keep running.
Reinvesting isn't just about more money. It's about alignment. It says, I trust the system I built. I believe in the long arc. I choose patience over performance. And every time you let gains compound, you send the market a signal. I'm not here for dopamine. I'm here for freedom.
So let's recap. Start early, automate everything, reinvest forever. That's the engine. Every other wealth law you'll hear is just trying to protect or accelerate what this system already does without effort, without friction, without noise.
And if you're thinking it's too late, it's not. The next best day to start was yesterday. The second best, today. Compounding doesn't need you to catch the top. It just needs you to stop waiting.
Up next, the defensive layer, because even the best engine breaks without protection. And most wealth isn't lost in crashes. It's lost in the decisions made right before them.
Law 7, protect the downside. Wealth isn't built by avoiding risk. It's built by surviving it. And the reason most people stay broke isn't because they made bad investments, it's because they made no plan for what happens when life breaks pattern. Job loss, medical bills, divorce, lawsuit. The wealthy don't avoid storms. They insure against them.
This is where fragility shows up first, in emergency rooms, courtrooms, and broken contracts. And the data is brutal. The #1 cause of bankruptcy in America? Medical bills. Not market crashes, not startup failures, healthcare. And most of it preventable with one policy. But insurance feels like a waste until it's not.
That's the paradox. The best protection feels pointless until it's priceless. The families I've seen preserve wealth across generations weren't the best investors. They were the best defenders. Umbrella policies, disability coverage, estate planning. Not sexy, but essential. Because compounding only works when you're still in the game.
Law 8, eliminate friction. The wealthy aren't just better at growing money, they're better at keeping it. And the silent killer? Lifestyle friction, fees, waste, complexity. Every dollar you leak is a dollar that stops compounding. And no one tells you this while you're rising, but it hits hard once you stop growing.
Let's get tactical. You earn $100,000 a year, but you pay $8,000 in recurring subscriptions, $4,000 in late fees, $3,500 in food waste, and another $2,000 in friction costs, travel, time delays, inefficiencies. That's nearly 20% gone before you even invest a dime. That's not spending. That's structural sabotage.
And it compounds in reverse, because leaks create stress. Stress creates reaction, and reaction kills systems. I've watched $10 million portfolios bleed dry because the structure had no friction filters. They said yes to every vendor, every remodel, every justice once, until the margin was gone. Not because they weren't rich, but because they weren't tight.
Law 9, audit your habits, not your spreadsheets. Because the system you build only works if your identity can carry it. Most people lose wealth because they upgrade their life faster than they upgrade their behavior. And no budget survives an identity mismatch.
Habits aren't just financial, they're psychological. Do you need to reward yourself to feel progress? Do you medicate boredom with purchases? Do you avoid looking at your accounts until it's too late? That's not bad behavior. That's untrained identity. And it can be fixed, but only if you see it first.
I've seen high-income professionals bankrupt themselves with one habit, entitlement. They assumed they earned a lifestyle. They forgot they were leasing it. Meanwhile, the quiet builders, they ran lean, stayed self-aware, and never stopped refining the machine, even when it was winning. That's the difference between ego wealth and real wealth. One performs, the other compounds.
So here's the question. What are you really defending? A lifestyle? A version of success? Or a system that makes you freer over time? Because if your defense is just comfort, you'll lose it the second life gets loud.
The real test isn't how fast you grow, it's how little you leak. That's how you win when others flatline. That's how you hold wealth when the market starts stripping it from everyone else.
Up next, the long game. Because even if your offense is strong and your defense is tight, none of it matters if your horizon is too short. Law 10 is about letting time do the work most investors won't wait for.
Law 10, think long. Act small. Because the most dangerous mistake in wealth building isn't losing money, it's rushing the process. Everyone wants the upside. No one wants the time. And that's exactly why most people quit right before the system starts working. Because wealth doesn't reward the loud. It rewards the patient.
The data's clear. Fidelity once did a study on which investors had the best performance over 20 years. You know who won? Dead people, and those who forgot they had accounts. Why? Because they didn't panic, they didn't trade, they didn't tinker. They let time work. The most underrated investing strategy in the world is inactivity.
I've watched this across cycles. The winners aren't the ones who forecast best. They're the ones who needed the least from the market. They bought strong assets, reinvested their dividends, and walked away. That's not passivity. That's discipline. And it beats 90% of active strategies in the real world.
But the system doesn't sell that. The system sells sizzle, the viral stock, the secret strategy, the seven-figure screenshot. And it all runs on one emotion, FOMO, fear of missing out. And when you chase it, you don't just lose money. You lose narrative control. You stop running your plan and start reacting to everyone else's.
FOMO isn't just about missing gains, it's about identity erosion. When your actions are driven by someone else's outcome, your plan is already broken. And in a world of constant digital flexing, the only way to stay grounded is to anchor to something deeper than returns.
Law 11, build an identity around stewardship, not speed. The people who hold wealth across decades don't define themselves by outcomes. They define themselves by process, by rules, by alignment. That's why they stay in the game. Because their identity isn't tied to a number, it's tied to a structure.
And here's the brutal truth. Most people aren't failing because they picked the wrong asset. They're failing because they never built a durable identity around their financial behavior. They chased. They flinched. They bailed. Not because they were weak, but because they had no anchor.
Wealth requires emotional distance from volatility, and that distance only comes from inner clarity. You have to know what game you're playing, what time horizon you've chosen, what outcomes actually matter to you. Otherwise, the noise will eat you alive.
Law 12, stay in the game longer than anyone else. That's it. That's the edge. Most people think wealth is a sprint, but it's a residency. The longer you stay in the compounding cycle, the more the math bends in your favor, and the fewer people are still playing.
So stop chasing 100x bets, stop pretending the market owes you momentum, and stop switching strategies every time a TikTok post makes you feel behind. The people who win, they're not faster. They're just still here, still building, still compounding.
And they've accepted one truth most investors never grasp. The boring path is the one that works. It doesn't feel urgent, but it's how wealth gets quiet and permanent.
Next, the builder's playbook. The tools, the systems, and the behavioral loops that turn these 12 laws into something that runs without friction. Because freedom isn't a finish line. It's a structure you live inside.
You've heard the 12 laws. Now it's time to systematize them. Because information doesn't build wealth. Execution does. And the people who compound freedom, they don't rely on memory, motivation, or mood. They build structures that make success automatic.
This is where theory becomes traction. The difference between someone who nods at financial advice and someone who builds a fortress out of it is simple execution rhythm. The builders create a system once and then let it run. That's the real unlock.
And the best systems are boring. They're repeatable, predictable, quiet. The flashy bets get headlines, but the quiet loops build empires. Think, save weekly, invest monthly, rebalance yearly, repeat for 20 years. That's not slow. That's inevitable.
Let's start with automation. If your income isn't auto-routed, split across high-yield savings, brokerage accounts, and long-term assets, you're still playing defense. Wealth doesn't grow by decision. It grows by design. And that design begins with removing your ability to sabotage the flow.
Here's a model 60-20-20. 60% covers lifestyle, 20 goes to investments, 20 to optionality, emergency cash, opportunity funds, risk capital. You can tweak the ratios, but the rule is fixed: money moves first, not last, because the more automatic your structure, the less emotional your behavior becomes.
And the behavior loop is everything. Most investors try to beat the market, but the winners beat themselves. They build habits that survive boredom, stress, volatility, and distraction. Their edge? Predictability. They know what they'll do next month because they've already chosen.
Tool stack matters too. You don't need 12 apps. You need one that makes friction impossible. Use a single investment dashboard. Track weekly net worth. Run monthly leak audits. And once a quarter, ask one question: did my systems compound, or did I interrupt them?
And let's talk tracking, not obsessively but strategically. Monthly check-ins, quarterly reviews, annual resets. Use simple metrics: cash buffer, debt ratio, investment allocation, income growth, optionality score. You're not chasing perfection, you're watching for drift.
And drift is subtle. One lifestyle upgrade, one delayed investment, one policy lapse. That's how systems slip. Not in crashes, but in quiet exits. The disciplined investor isn't reactive, they're ritualized. Their calendar has checkpoints. Their tools remind them. Their actions compound without redecision.
And here's the killer move: stack identity to behavior. Don't say I'm saving. Say I'm a builder. Don't say I'm trying to invest. Say I'm someone who compounds. When your language shifts, your decisions follow. That's not fluff. That's psychology. And the wealthy don't hope to behave. They design who they become.
This is how you beat lifestyle creep, how you escape comparison loops, how you stay in the game when everyone else is switching playbooks. Because when the structure holds, you don't just save, you scale, quietly, relentlessly, without noise.
And the system doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be consistent. Small moves, repeated. Small wins, compounded. That's how portfolios get dense. That's how optionality appears. That's how you go from financial defense to financial autonomy.
Up next, the voices of the wealthy. We'll step into their frameworks, their quotes, their habits, their laws. Because they didn't invent these rules. They obeyed them. And now, so can you. We've walked through the 12 laws, but now let's anchor them. Because these principles aren't abstract. They're embedded in how the most successful investors, entrepreneurs, and legacy families operate. The patterns are clear once you stop listening to social media and start listening to history.
Start with Warren Buffett. His rule? Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. That's Law 12 in disguise. Stay in the game longer than anyone else because time and temperament are his edge, not speed, not prediction.
And it goes deeper. Buffett didn't just invest early. He reinvested relentlessly. From age 10 to 93, his core advantage wasn't strategy, it was compounding over 80 years. He once said, "My wealth has come from a combination of living in America, some lucky genes, and compound interest." Translation, the laws work. If you do.
Let's go international. Li Ka-shing, Hong Kong's richest man, taught the 5-bucket rule: live on 30%, invest 20, grow skill with 15, network with 10, give 5. That's Law 1, Law 3, Law 10, all in one behavior set. The takeaway?
Take a look at Naval Ravikant. His entire thesis is built on leverage and patience. He's famous for saying, play long-term games with long-term people. But his deeper point? You're not going to get rich renting out your time. That's a warning against time-leak lifestyles and a call to build systems that work while you sleep.
Naval also reframes money as freedom units, not status symbols. That's a mental model the wealthy use constantly. They don't think in income. They think in insulation. If an expense doesn't buy back time, reduce fragility, or increase optionality, they skip it.
Let's shift to discipline. Jocko Willink, a Navy SEAL turned author, says discipline equals freedom. And in finance, that means controlling impulse equals gaining control over outcomes. If you can't say no to lifestyle inflation, you're saying yes to financial fragility.
And then there's Morgan Housel, author of The Psychology of Money. His thesis? Wealth is what you don't see. Spending is a signal. But savings? That's power. He writes, spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. That's Law 7 through 9, defense, friction, and leak prevention.
Housel also says tail events drive everything, meaning 90% of returns often come from 10% of decisions. That's why staying in the game, Law 12, isn't optional. It's where the magic happens, because the best day to be invested is the one after everyone else quit.
Let's not forget regret minimization. Jeff Bezos built Amazon with one question: when I'm 80, will I regret not trying this? That's long-game thinking. It's Law 10 reframed as future-proofing, because the people who win don't optimize for comfort. They optimize for alignment.
And alignment isn't theoretical. Ray Dalio's principles are built around system feedback. Pain plus reflection equals progress. In wealth terms, every mistake becomes signal if you review it. That's what turns a failed trade into an upgraded playbook.
And that's the meta pattern. The wealthy don't avoid error. They absorb it into the system. They don't need every decision to be right. They just need to keep compounding the ones that are. That's not intelligence. That's structure.
So ask yourself, whose voice guides your money? Social media? Fear? Lifestyle ads? Or builders who obey the laws? Because the rules haven't changed. Only the noise has.
And the irony? Most of the loudest voices online aren't wealthy. They're monetizing your attention, not compounding your outcome. That's why the wealthy tend to be quiet, because once the system's running, they don't need validation.
Up next, the fork in the road. 12 laws. One choice. You can keep hoping wealth arrives, or you can start building the life that obeys it. Quietly, relentlessly, permanently.
You've just heard the 12 laws. Not ideas, not tips, laws. And the truth is, most people won't act on them. Not because they're lazy, but because the game they're playing is rigged for distraction. They don't need more motivation. They need clarity. That's what you have now. And that's why this is the fork in the road.
On one side, same script. Work, spend, hope. Live paycheck to paycheck with a high income and no margin. Chase wealth signals but leak the engine that builds it. Wake up at 58 wondering where the time and the compounding went.
On the other side, a quiet blueprint, a system you trust, a future you design, not react to. One where the habits you build today start to do the heavy lifting. Not for Instagram, not for status, but for sovereignty.
And here's what no one tells you. This doesn't require brilliance. It requires behavior. It requires obeying the boring. The wealthy didn't invent new laws. They respected the old ones. And they respected time more than trends.
So what happens now? You pick one law, not 12, just one. Start there. Automate your savings. Audit your leaks. Cut one piece of lifestyle friction. Track one piece of lifestyle friction. Track one monthly metric. Build one habit that feels permanent. Then layer the rest. Slowly, relentlessly.
Because the future isn't built in a moment. It's built in momentum. And once the compounding starts, you don't have to outrun anyone. You just have to outlast the excuses.
Subscribe to Finance Frontier AI on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on X for signal-driven financial intelligence. Share this episode with a friend and help us hit 10,000 downloads as we build the smartest macro community online. We cover wealth, AI, systems, and sovereignty across 4 series. And if you've got a story worth decoding, we may pitch it in a future episode. Go to financefrontierai.com and tap the pitch page.
And sign up for the 5 Times Edge, our weekly newsletter packed with asymmetric strategies, equity plays, and mindset upgrades you won't find on the news feed, all at financefrontierai.com. This podcast is for educational purposes only, not financial advice. Always do your own research and consult a licensed advisor.
Markets evolve. Risks compound. No forecast, no matter how strategic, guarantees future results. Manage your exposures accordingly. Copyright 2025 Finance Frontier AI. All rights reserved. Reproduction or redistribution of this content without written permission is strictly prohibited.
One last thought. Seneca once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Maybe the question isn't how much you can earn, but how little you actually need to be free. Start there. Start small. But above all, start.